This is a circumstance where any other person would have gone to prison because they compromised the security of the United States. But again, the attitude of this administration is anything we do is lawful, correct, and none of it matters because we're the greatest guys in the history of the world. That egotistical attitude at some point is going to kill people. And I don't mean our enemies. It's going to kill people, our allies. It's going to break an advantage the United States has, or our service members could be shot down and killed over Iran, over Greenland, who knows, right? Wherever they think their attitude and bluster and bravado will give them an advantage.
Hello and welcome to the Trump Reports. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're joined by Malcolm Nance, an intelligence and foreign policy analyst and a former cryptologic intelligence officer in the US Navy. Malcolm also fought for Ukraine in the 2022 Russian invasion. Malcolm, welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I just wanted to start with your overall take, really, on this Signal Gate fiasco.
You know, I give a heavy sigh because as someone that worked in the field and, you know, as a subordinate intelligence collection group to the National Security Agency, what we did and what we do is we're always third party to a conversation of things people don't want us to know. And the highest level of intelligence of any government is two things. One, the actual codes which encrypt and decrypt communications for the highest level of military or in government. And the second is to get within the conversation and discussion bubble of the National Command Authority. And that is the president, the vice president, secretary of defense, director of the CIA, director of national intelligence, secretary of state, commerce, energy. Does this all sound familiar? All of the players who were involved in this scandal. What we found this week is that a journalist managed to accidentally get within this bubble, the National Command Authority's discussion and decision making loop. But the real issue is not that they use this Signal chat, which does have end to end encryption. But the most important factor is they were using their private phones, which doesn't have any protection. And for anyone, the Russians, the Chinese, the Israelis, the Iranians, the Danish, if it's in their interest, is to get in the phone, get access to the resources within that phone, and you can watch Signal chat without breaking signal. And so those phones, technically, since they were all civilians, they were bringing these phones into secure facilities where phones are never allowed. They were making decisions amongst the highest levels of the United States. They essentially were walking microphones. And so this, in fact, could be the biggest security breach in American history.
And so Pete Hegseth, we'll get more into this now, I think, but Pete Hegseth has denied that this information was sensitive, that this was classified information. So is that true? Would this information have been classified information or not?
Look, when a foreign power gets 2.5 hours of advance notice of American military operations without using, tens of thousands of other sensors, such as, radar detection and voice intercept at the tactical level, diplomats and watching when pizza's delivered at the Pentagon, right? All the usual indicators that something's happened in our world, right, which is the communications and signals intercept world. To not you reveal any secrets, I'm going to constantly use examples from World War II. This was the equivalent of Hitler using the Lorenz machine. That was the machine that was far more powerful than an Enigma machine, where Hitler had his private chats with his commanders. Well, your facility at Bletchley Park broke that machine. The Nazis did not know it. So they were quite blithely saying everything in secret. And so the advanced command control communications and warning of impending military operations at this level, the National Command Authority level, Secretary of State, Defense, Intelligence, uh, who is also, by the way, speaking on a actual secure cryptologic device that was sitting on his desk, which cannot be broken by using a private telephone. He just literally gave the highest level, top above top secret communications and discussions on a device in which 16-year-olds chat. So, yes, every word he said was literally above top secret. We call that top secret special compartmented information hyphen in a special access program within the National Command Authority bubble. So these aren't just general secrets. What they want to do now is backtrack and say, oh, the actual launch of the F 18s carrying X bombs going to X target and killing X people at X time 2 hours from now is not a secret. That is ridiculously laughable, and it is an insult to every person who worked within the intelligence and military community.
Why is it so dangerous for this information to be communicated this way and, in this case, leaked? I mean, what are the actual practical risks on the ground to the people who this information applies to?
Well, you have to understand that the kind of people that would be targeting these members of the National Command Authority are not going to be, how can I put it? It's not going to be El Salvador. It's not going to be Burundi, right? Even though they might try. It's going to be America and the West's greatest near peer adversaries. It's going to be China, who, in looking at our encryption, in case you wonder where all those MIT graduates with their PhDs who came to the United States are working, they are without any choice working for the Ministry of State Security. China's NSA, and they will be there trying to break all of the encryption of Signal, WhatsApp, all these other, things, U.S. military encryption systems. The Russians, who have, been doing this for, over 100 years, they'll be doing the same thing, using all of their computer power, their brain power going into this. And so, one of the philosophies that we have, you have at GCHQ, we have at NSA, is what we call the philosophy of ABC. ABC stands for always be collecting. So that little jokey way of saying it is we are in a constant state of surveillance against whoever our targets are. And the reason that we're in a constant state is so that we can find a niche, a hole, a crack, a chink in their communication security armor. And in this particular instance, again, you didn't have to apply multi globally powered computers using the advanced AI to direct attack the encryption of Signal at Pete Hegseth's phone number. You could do it with rudimentary AI or technically old 60s and 70s intercept technologies against his phone number, just his phone number. And you get into his phone, and then it expands out from there. His wife's phone, his friend's phone, all of the phone numbers in that group chat, and his girlfriend if he has one, right? And all of them will have different signatures of when they communicate, how they communicate, and this will give us a surveillance picture of our target. The information this individual possesses is the entirety of all war plans of the United States of America and a good piece of our allies as well throughout NATO, the Five Eyes, U.S., New Zealand, Australia, Canada alliance. Also, the picture of all of the capabilities of our enemies, whoever they are, whatever is read in his desk. So if you have knowledge of what he has knowledge of, right, you can either let that knowledge flow, which is what that's what AB stands for. ABC stands for always be collecting. But we will make the decision about when the information we have collected from you becomes applicable. We don't do things like direct attack your phone and put things you might notice onto your phone. We make your whatever the surveillance entity is a passive collector, a silent microphone. I mean, the Russians used to put microphones into the seal of the Great Seal of the United States at the embassy. We dug tunnels in in the Cold War, and literally burrowed up and put microphones underground in Russian embassies and military facilities. We use multi-billion dollar surveillance platforms on airplanes or things like your RC-135 that the RAF flies. And we do all of these vacuum cleaner type collections to gain advantage in information that is diplomatic, military, intelligence, and economic. DIME, D-I-M-E. And those advanced knowledges allows us to be far more competitive or allows us to kill you with much greater efficiency. And we're really good at taking collection to death cycle, right? This is one of those things. But like Bletchley Park back in World War II, if you're in the highest levels of a government, if you're in the Enigma machine, you're in the Lorenz machine, you don't want to say a thing. Okay, you just want the enemy to walk into a bulldozer of death and not know how their U-boat sank, right? U-boat went out, U-boat never came back. That was Alan Turing and his crew, and the ladies operating the machines at Bletchley Park, who were just barely one step ahead of the enemy. But if you wanted to know whether Hitler was moving troops to Normandy or the Pas de Calais after your deception operations, you needed to be in the Lorenz machine, which is very, 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 very high level. And he's sitting there talking to Himmler and going, "Yeah, the Allies are going to land in the Pas de Calais." Then you're definitely landing in Normandy, right? This costs people lives by the thousands. Same with what we're doing today. Should Pete Hegseth have compromised the national security of the United States, I'm already seeing signs of where either the Russians have understood us to be dramatically naive idiots, and Donald Trump just a remarkably manipulable individual in terms of their negotiations with Ukraine. Or are they reading Marco Rubio, the vice president, and Donald Trump's actual negotiating positions? Or is Marco Rubio giving the Russians those negotiating positions and the Chinese are finding out about it in advance? And China would make bets on the stock exchange, whether they buy treasury bills, whether they sell off American assets, whether they allow Elon Musk to put a battery factory in Shanghai. They will make tens of billions or hundreds of billions or even $1 trillion off of the advanced knowledge that they have from someone who has abused a secure communication pathway to use an unsecure communication pathway. And when we work in the signals intelligence world, we have a technical name for someone who makes an error on the communication security that gives us advantage. And that technical intelligence term is an idiot. And we love idiots because idiots are the kind of people who, we expect to see at, the sergeant level, the corporal level, the communications officer who uses the wrong encryption on the wrong day and reveals everything. And that's what happened with Bletchley Park and Enigma, right? One day, Bletchley would get like 50% of the code broken, and then the next morning it changes, right? And you're like, we can't get that code. But then some idiot, professional term, remember, doesn't set the rotors for the next day, and it encodes in the previous day's code. And you can see Turing and the crew going, "Yay, what an idiot." Because when he catches it and sets the next day's encryption, you already have the start of that message. And he's going to send that message exactly the same again. And that, of course, gives you we say that, the nose of the camel under the tent. In this particular circumstance, it's a camel stampeding the tent and eating hors d'oeuvres because you have given him access to everything. And since they have been using their own phones, not secure encryption communications devices or satellite secure video chats that they could have had at any time, even phones with apps that are secured by NSA, because they wanted the convenience of their civilian world applications. They turned into the snack that the camel is eating.
And on top of all of this, it seems that Steve Witkoff, you said in your Substack
Oh,
post, may actually have been in the Kremlin at the time that a lot of these messages were being sent. Presumably, the Russians, as you've said there, back in the Soviet times even, have a myriad of ways of viewing what's on your phone when you're in the Kremlin.
yeah. Well, he insists that he didn't bring it into the meetings that he was having with Putin, right? Which means you either left it in one of three places. You left it in a Russian controlled secure box outside of the meeting room, which means Russia's Special Communications, Information Service, their NSA of the FSB, or a special dedicated collection team of the GRU, or a special Steve Witkoff team of the Russian clandestine service, the SVR, or all three of them simultaneously, right? Are now that box could literally be a giant electromagnetic beacon that turns that cell phone, even if it's off, into a giant lighthouse O collection, as we would say, right? Where you are just broadcasting into the Russian collection systems areas. Even with your phone off, it has power. And we have there is this is a truism in signals intelligence. With enough power, enough proximity, and enough technological know-how, anything can be turned on and used as a collection device. Your television, your lights, anything, right? There's enough cleverness in this world that you are going to have a hard time escaping that. Not your listeners, because Russia doesn't care about your listeners. So Signal's awesome for you. Your phone is secure because everything in this world comes down to the analysis by a human. And I'm not going to waste 8 hours of my duty day watching some guy out in, Middlesex, talk to his mechanic. So, but Steve Witkoff is the special advisor to Donald Trump on Ukraine. This man may be the key of Trump giving Ukraine to Russia, right? Because Trump is enamored with Moscow. He's in love with Vladimir Putin. Any insight or, even Trump's phone itself could be compromised. His only protection is in the Oval Office. There's a lot of shielding that goes on that doesn't make that a transmitter. So if Witkoff was there, if he handed the second option is he handed the phone to his assistant, it was sitting in a briefcase, and the assistant is sitting in the halls of the Kremlin. Same thing. You are in an electronic capture box. Or he put it in a briefcase. There's a shielding device around it, and he leaves it in his armored vehicle. Well, I don't know whether your driver's compromised. I don't know whether they have some system that is already broken through the shielding or uses the shielding to act as a magnifier. Let me tell you, technology of signals intelligence is at least 10 years ahead of wherever you are right now. Whatever the cutting edge is, they're way ahead of you. And Russia is a country chock full of very smart people. And since the forming of the NKVD under Stalin, this has been a collection area which is their highest priorities, because they also know that Steve Witkoff is an idiot. And even though he may tell them what he wants, knowing 10 minutes before he walks through the door what he's going to say is of the highest value.
Well, in the end, of course, nobody actually needed to intercept this necessarily because a journalist from The Atlantic was added to this Signal group chat. I mean, how major of a security breach is that?
It's ridiculously major. Again, all this really revealed is not the Signal group chat. Set that aside. It's that every one of these, remember, professional intelligence collection term, idiots who were violating communication security protocol, who were using their own private phone, the same phone that they call their kids, their mistresses, their bartenders, Uber Eats. Those numbers could have ended up on this chat. If you, Mike Waltz communicates with Moscow. Mike Waltz communicates with Kiev. He communicates with the Chinese. It could have been an accident. Even the slightest butt dial is that camel stampeding through your tent. No nose under the tent. This compromise is a compromise of utter, and again, I'm giving you my intelligence professional opinion, utter stupidity. If it had been in the United States, you would never have heard a word about this. All right? We would have ensured that no one would ever know, and this collection would go on forever. But the advantage taken of it would have been amazing. The most amazing part to me about letting the journalist in by accident is that it was just a common mistake many of us could make on group chats. When you have 18, 20 people and you go, oh, I really want, Jay Goldstein, and it comes up, automatically recommends Jay Goldblum or Goldberg, and you think you're getting some undersecretary of defense for intelligence. And in fact, you just got the editor in chief of the Atlantic, and you don't care because you're a master of the universe. You're in the Trump administration. Nothing you do is ever wrong. And this is how they're thinking. Just today, they have once again changed their excuse that the Department of Homeland Security, that some low-level staffer loaded this up into Steve Waltz's phone, and they're going to fire that individual. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Okay? And the Russians didn't load it. The Chinese didn't load it. The Iranians didn't load it. All right? The Burkina Fasans didn't load it. You did it on your phone and you made a mistake. And instead of saying, oh my God, we have a big security problem here. I have Director of National Intelligence, a woman who should never have been allowed near any of America's top secret sensitive intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. All right. She's a walking, talking threat to the American national security because she loves Russia. She loves Edward Snowden, the greatest traitor in American history since Benedict Arnold. She's in love with warlords that are now ensconced in Moscow. And she has access to all of America's secrets. She didn't see any problem with any of these communications, even though she was briefed. Mike Waltz, director of national security, the national security advisor, was a former special forces colonel. Use secure cryptographic systems all the time to keep secrets out of our enemies' hands. The attitude of the White House and the National Command Authority is we will do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want it, and we don't care what the consequences are or what you think of it because you, the rest of the world, and everybody outside this room are flaming liberals. And that the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the Burundians, anyone who was intercepting against this White House is celebrating. Medals are being thrown around with abandon, and people in your country, Great Britain, are going to have to seriously think about what you say to the Americans now. Okay, because this isn't something where you can maybe your security services will throw out what we call a red dye, which is how we used to catch Russian spies. We put a lie in there and see how fast it got to Moscow. In this particular circumstance, you may have to throw out a blue dye, right, to see how fast something the Americans are told gets to Moscow or is used against Britain. So, I'm afraid to say all of this principally because I love my country. I love your country. I'm supposed to be in Port Marion next week, but we are now I can't go. We are in a circumstance where these attitudes and behaviors towards security and national security are being turned on their head and an administration that is adversarial to common sense and good security.
Is there any sign in any of this that Pete Hegseth or the others involved in this leak will face any consequences?
Nah, never. Look, they're already. Look, again, these are the masters of the universe. This is how they view themselves. Look, they won that election by 250,000 votes in a couple of key states. And they talk like they won in a landslide with 90%. They didn't. They won 31% of the voting American electorate. 30.5% went to Kamala Harris, right? That's 150 million people. 90 million people didn't even bother to vote. So This is not a mandate, but what they're doing with the backing of the world's richest man and the attitude of Donald Trump's insanely outrageous, fascist loving ego is that anything they do is correct. Every person they choose, no matter how incompetent, no matter how dangerous, I'm looking at you, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., no matter how outlandish, it's the best decision ever made. I believe it was. I'm trying to remember the name of the book in where the protagonist constantly says this is always the best decision or the best of all worlds. All activities are the best of all worlds, and this is how they view it, which means there will never be actual security. People, and I want you to pay very close attention to this. People can die. Our service members, had it been in the interest of Moscow or Beijing to call Tehran and let the Iranians, or if the Iranians had somehow been monitoring Pete Hegseth's phone the entire time, would have had 2 hours to sit there waiting to attack the Americans, or they would have expended every ballistic missile they had in their inventory to target the aircraft carrier, just in case, just to get a shot off to make the Americans think about it, even though they would miss, right? I've done this. I've been in situations where I've handed over a piece of paper and we've all had to sit there and we're looking at our watch like, why isn't the enemy walking into our trap so we can kill them faster? I've got to get coffee. And lo and behold, here they come. And they do not survive our encounter, right? We give them a significant emotional event, as we often say in the intelligence world. And it costs them many people their lives. Uh, our enemies have this capacity, and it's only our literal, I use these words technically, stupidity operated by idiots who do not care about our enemy's capacity will give them everything that they want.
And what sort of consequences could someone face over this leak? I mean, if the person who had leaked this information was in a far more junior position, perhaps, what sort of consequences could you face legally, or as you say, the threat to your life from an intelligence leak?
I mean, it happens all the time. We had the famous case of Reality Winner, right? Former U.S. Air Force communications intercept operator went to a government contractor, left the Air Force, went to a government contractor, was leafing through some top secret documents, thought she found something that was very important, leaked it to Glenn Greenwald at the Intercept, podcast and blog, and went to prison for 5 years. She was caught. They could tell who printed it, when it was printed, where it was printed, and got it all off the piece of paper that was put up on the internet. Con- Convicted and sent to prison. For years, I did not support her until about year number 5, when I was on air with her mother, and I said, "Look, this is a junior airman idiot. She's going to jail." Many people, things were happening in the Trump first administration White House where people should have gone to prison. This is a circumstance where any other person would have gone to prison because they compromised the security of the United States. But again, the attitude of this administration is anything we do is lawful, correct, and none of it matters because we're the greatest guys in the history of the world. That egotistical attitude at some point is going to kill people. And I don't mean our enemies. It's going to kill people, our allies. It's going to break an advantage the United States has, or our service members could be shot down and killed over Iran, over Greenland, who knows, right? Wherever they think their attitude and bluster and bravado will give them an advantage. As a person, the third person, as we call it in the conversation, right? From the signals intelligence perspective. Oh, we love people like that. We love them good, right? And we're always rolling on these guys, right? We're always recording what they're saying. And all we do is sit back and we go to as watch turnover is going on, we get our coffee cup and we go, is that idiot still talking? I go, yeah, he is. And he's like, war plans, right? He's like, yep. And you put it down and then the decisions about what to do with that intelligence go to the decision making authority. If it's the mullahs in Iran, could be something bad, right? It could be having their IRGC liaison officer receive a phone call. I got a hot one straight from Moscow. He's going to call you. And the Russians are like, hey, it'd be awful if, 300 U.S. aircraft started striking at you in 1 hour, 37 minutes. Get ready, bye. And this stuff happens. Our opponents do it all the time based on the looseness of our security. Can I point out to you, the British had Pegasus tankers flying in these missions. You had strike support aircraft. Your aircraft could have been shot down, terrorists released to mortar RAF Akrotiri and blow up your aircraft on the flight line in advance of these things. SAS or SBS people who are liaison to Navy SEAL teams, they're all the way there. I've run into your guys all over the place, can be killed because of the looseness of these lips. Okay. I have a great photo poster from World War II. I'm on the board of the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., and they had this poster that's from World War II, and it has all these like RAF and British officers around a woman, and it says, keep mum, she's not so dumb. Well, in this instance, they should put up a picture of Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and Marco Rubio with that. Keep mum, they're not so dumb, or they're pretty dumb, because that's how these things happen. I'm pretty sure someone is already making that meme up on ChatGPT even as we speak.
Well, you mentioned the threat to US allies as well. I mean, perhaps just as
Mm.
worrying for those of us in Europe were the views of Pete Hegseth and JD Vance that you could see on this Signal chat. I mean, Vance was opposed to the strikes even going ahead because he felt it was too beneficial for Europe. Pete Hegseth, responding to that, called Europe pathetic freeloaders. I mean, what does all of this say about the US alliances with European allies?
I have to tell you, it's revealing to be inside the room, right? You have now been introduced to being a third person in the conversation. All right, the unknown person that they don't know, and you're getting their real true feelings. There's no walking this back. I was talking about European chocolate, right? No, you were talking about the fact that 3% of our trade goes through the Suez Canal and the Bab el Mandab waterway, where I've been, easily a dozen times. I've done operations off of Yemen when I was in the Navy, doing a job very similar to this. But more importantly, the attitude about how you, Great Britain, Europe, and that means you, okay, you're included in there, are a bunch of freeloaders. The mindset of this White House is how can I put it? It's petty mobster with a transactional activity mindset. And I recall the phrase from the movie Goodfellas, if you want to understand how they believe. These are guys who think that they're mimicking Joe Pesci and, Ray Liotta and Robert De Niro and Goodfellas. They're not. They're not nowhere near as cool or charming. These guys believe that line of, oh, you didn't make your rent? I don't care. Pay me. Oh, you had a bad week of sales? I don't care. Pay me. Oh, they didn't ship enough mink coats this week? I don't care. Pay me. That is the attitude that permeates this White House and their belief. And I find it very hard to believe because J.D. Vance, at least for a very short time, was a journalist in the U.S. Marine Corps and has gone overseas to Iraq and seen other places, and understands what a passport is about. But everyone in the U.S. intelligence community, we're internationalists for a reason. America created this massive global trade after the fall of the English Empire. And when everyone got independent, everyone wanted the refrigerators that we produced for blood in World War II, the cars that were Jeeps and then turned into Oldsmobiles after World War II. Globalism and global trade is a uniquely American invention on the scale that we're dealing with. Empire with the British and the French and the Dutch, that's one thing. Where everyone gets to participate in this game has only existed since 1945. And they seem somewhat hostile to the global free market, making America rich. And it only comes from broad brush ignorance. That's the only way to describe it. And isolationism we haven't seen since the German American Bund in 1939 helped create the America First movement, who were also supporting Hitler, by the way, and wanted the United States to stay out of World War II, even as Hitler was entering the Sudetenland, and Churchill was making desperate phone calls to FDR. We had this party that believed that you are all a bunch of freeloaders and we should just let the Nazis have you, and then we can do trade with the Nazis. Now, that's not ahistorical, by the way. Those people existed in the United States and they were called the America First movement. They are now back with a vengeance, and they believe that you are still, since 1945, a bunch of freeloaders, even though your country, I believe, is 168 British soldiers died in Afghanistan. Disgraceful that we would ever sully our relationship with you. I go to Bletchley Park every year to pay homage to the code breakers that literally saved America, because your country falling, we would have been next. The atomic bomb would have been produced in Norway, and America would be living a alternate universe, right? The man in the high castle universe. So, we are allies because, as neighbors, friends, and having this historical relationship, why would we start treating you like, you're some some person who is stealing out of Donald Trump's pocket? You're under attack by Russia. You've had Russian spies kill people on your land with chemical weapons, right? You have people, we don't know what the cause of that fire is at Heathrow substation, but I'm very suspicious. We should be assisting you at every turn, in thanks for the 168 soldiers you've lost, in thanks for the relationship which has endured, since World War One. My grandfather, by the way, fought in France and took a steamship that stopped in England. And as an African American from Georgia, England was the first foreign country he was introduced to before the battlefields of World War One. We have a special relationship because it has been paid for in blood. And I will never, with exception of the fact that I do go to Battersea Church in London and I spit in the direction of Benedict Arnold, I will never sully the relationship. Consider, as an American, our relationship sullied. But a new world is coming, and Elon Musk has convinced Trump that the world's poll should change and that you should be considered an adversary, not an ally. Disgraceful.
And you talk about that mentality. I mean, the latest on this is the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Pete Hegseth has also been bringing his wife into at least two meetings with foreign military counterparts where sensitive information was discussed. I mean,
So
that is a breach as well, isn't it? And it's reflective of this mentality you're talking about. I assume.
they own the world. They're Trump people. They can do what they want. Laws mean nothing to them anymore. They believe that so long as the MAGA base supports them in any activity that they're doing, which the MAGA base's real threat is the intensity of their belief in this form of insane anti American cultism and this cult of personality they've drawn around Trump. Everyone in the Republican Party is afraid of that because if you cross them, they will politically nullify you. They now have the power, the economic power, financial power of the richest man in the world, who will use it against you as a person. And not to mention the very fact that they're concerned that people with guns can take their lives and the lives of their family. Jane Mayer, the great writer in New Yorker, wrote an article about how Republican politicians are afraid for their lives. This is mind-boggling. We haven't had a situation like this since, the Soviet Union. Even modern Russia, they make you fall out of a window, but they can't make everyone fall out of a window, right? In Soviet times, they threatened it to everyone, and everyone was afraid. I'm not afraid. What are you going to do? Take away my birthday? as my mother would say. But I have something more powerful, and the average American has something more powerful. Pete Hegseth does not have the ability to open his mouth and call him the idiot that he is. So by exposing his wife, they're going to say, Trump's going to pat him on the wrist and say, don't do that anymore. It looks bad. It doesn't make my reality show look good. To every other person, I think that when this administration is over and done with, and now since they're dismantling the American government, trying to replace it with AI, that's, get rid of 1 million workers and replace them with AI. When the next administration comes, and there will be one, there's going to have to be a truth and reconciliation process to determine one, how badly is American and allied national security damaged? Well, we have to literally start all over. And will we hold these people to account? Because they will never be held to account under this administration, ever.
Well, Malcolm, like you say, there's at least 4 more years of this now, and I'm sure we're going to discuss a lot more of this in that time. But thank you very much for joining us today, Malcolm Nance, on the Trump Report.
It's my pleasure to be here.